What's up? What's up? What's up, everybody? You're listening to the Data is My Science podcast, the show that makes data your passion. I am your host, Dapper Data. Today, we're going to talk about the mind. We're going to get deep into the mind, right? We're going to understand how the mind works, how it's related to data visualization. Okay, we're going to tie all of those things. All right. Psychology knowledge helps to create the design which will make users perform the actions they're expected to do, right? Such as making purchases or contacting the team, whatever it is, whatever action you have, right? Sometimes a design can influence that action. And it's important to understand how that works. Okay, so we're going to talk about design psychology. We're going to talk about data visualization. We're going to dive into both of those things. And as you know, I like to bring a special guest on because I don't know everything, right? I don't know anything really, but but I
You
learned
know
from my
almost
guests.
everything.
You know, I know enough to be dangerous and everything, right? And I'm gaining from every guest that's here. So I brought on a special guest, right? His name is Thomas Watkins, man. Say what's up, Thomas.
Hey, how's it going?
Yeah, yeah. No, thank you
Good
for
to be
being on
on.
the
Good to be
podcast,
on.
man. Thank you for being on. So this guy Thomas, man, he is really focused in on design psychology. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. But first, I want to let you know who this guy is, right? Thomas Watkins is a thought leader, speaker, and industry practitioner located in Houston, Texas. Okay, I'm sure they got some good food out there. He is a lifelong learner who has a passion for bringing greater clarity to the world. Thomas has made it his career focus to combine technology with design psychology, and we'll talk a lot about that. So, Thomas, tell them a little bit about yourself, man.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. So, as you heard in the introduction, I am a design psychologist. What I do is, and what people in my position, you might have heard UX for the listeners out there, people who build digital products and they are working on technology. What you are, if you're doing it right, I would say, is you're a design psychologist, which means that you're designing things with how do people work in mind when you're designing it so that it's going to fit into their life and really become invisible as people are trying to do the things that they need to do.
Yeah, yeah, no, I like that. I like that you mentioned the word invisible, right?
Right.
Because you're almost funneling through the mind, right? And I mean, some people may call it manipulation, right? I don't like to call it that, in a sense because somebody might get upset depending on who it is. But when I think about design psychology, right, I think about a book. I know we've discussed a book called the Nudge Theory, right? Now, the Nudge Theory, right, it talked about things like um, the reason why small plates are created, right, for an individual, right, when you're eating, is so that they want to promote healthier eating, right, or smaller eating, right, because a lot of people go and they just go above and beyond and eat way more than they should. Or if you're in an office space, then there's one trash can and you have about 10 people around it, right? Well, they want to promote you getting up and actually walking to the trash can instead of it being a trash can at everybody's desk, so you'll never get up, right? You can just throw the trash away there, or at a bar at a restaurant, right? We talked about a restaurant that I work with a lot and own, and looking at that, right? When you're at a restaurant, you have the real popular drinks at eye level, right? Of the bar because you want everybody to really say, hey, what's that? You want to taste it and things like that. So it's and I'm sure that we can talk a lot about how there is a quote unquote manipulation, right? Or design psychology in a sense, with technology. I mean, the web design, websites, data visualization, right? But just stepping back, right? You are owner of a company called Three Leaf, right? And so when we talk about Three Leaf, I did a little bit of research on it, right? Three Leaf, it says a design collective that employs applied psychology and design principles to support the creation of usable products and services, right?
Right.
You know, is like tell us a little bit about Three Leaf.
Yes, so Three Leaf is we're a consulting practice, but what we do is, with our clients, there are people who are building digital products and they say, we want our product to be successful. We have this user base of users who have to use our products. And what they're trying to achieve is make their product successful. What they need folks like us for is we understand how users are. It's kind of like, do you remember in the Matrix how the Oracle is able to achieve things that the architect cannot achieve? Is because
Yeah.
she understands how people actually are, and she's like, well, no, architect, you can't just build the Matrix and just do
Mhm.
what you want. You have to give people choice, and then there's this whole thing like people need to
Right.
know that they have that, and that way the Matrix won't fail, and then they kind of have this partnership. And so, you know, right? Yeah, yeah, kind of an interesting analogy there. But like, so, what you're doing is you're saying, okay, now, hopefully there's some level of altruism in there, and depending on
Mhm.
what kind of product you're working on. So if you're doing a social service, make it easier for people to sign up for, healthcare on a website or something like that. But it's
Mhm.
really just adapting to how do people work, how do people want to operate, and how do you make a technology to fit into that. So one way to look at this is taking a step back. We're in an information age, and we interface with technology all the time. There's computing databases, and there's a whole, like, if you might imagine, like, if like aliens were to visit the planet, they might conclude that, well, there's these creatures running around, like there's, humans, there's animals
Mhm.
and things like that, but then there's this digital side to things that exists and is wirelessly
Right.
sending information everywhere, right? So to our kind of existence, we're interfacing with that stuff constantly. So every time we order something and we're touching a screen, we're dealing with an interface with that digital side of the world. So when
Mhm.
you're ordering from a restaurant, or if you punch in a address to so the GPS can take you to the location, or anything that you're doing, you're interfacing constantly with the digital aspect of human life, and that digital presence is only growing and growing and growing and growing. So as we get everything's more integrated, everything is more instant, everything is faster. How do we make
Mhm.
sure that as we're interfacing with the digital aspect of our reality, that it's as seamless as possible, so we're not getting in people's ways, so people aren't getting annoyed by the technology itself. They're able to look past the technology through to their actual goals, like the technology's not there. The technology just
Mhm.
then becomes this invisible helper behind the scenes. And the way to achieve that is you want to have an understanding of human psychology. So the human is the center of this experience. And
Right.
anytime the technology's there, it's for the most part kind of invisible, right? Not literally invisible. You can see screens and things like that, but it's not interrupting their life. It's not getting in the
Yeah.
way. It's not forcing itself into your attention. Instead, it's just this facilitator of human life.
Yeah. No. No. I hear you, man. I hear you, and I definitely thank you for breaking that down. And so when you go through the process, say with a client, right, with Three Leaf, are you understanding the way that their audience or their consumer thinks, right? Is that a very important part of that
Very
process?
important, critical. So in our industry, we've got something called a persona. And
Uh-huh.
a persona, you probably heard of it, and
Avatar or
most of the listeners have
something,
probably heard of it. What's your understanding of a persona?
right? Well, good question, right? Because when I think about it, right, I mean, I hear it all the time in marketing, right? They're like, "What's your avatar?" Right? Who does this person? Everything from if you're selling something, who is your actual real target audience, right? What is their do they enjoy shoot, do they enjoy long walks on the beach, right, or something
Right,
like that, right?
right,
you're getting real
right,
detailed about it, right? Are they married? Are they single, right?
right.
Are they what ethnicity are they what gender are they? It's like is that what you mean by when you say the persona?
It's yeah, yes, yes. So it's kind of like that. The kind of persona that most people have been exposed to is like buyer personas. So that is
Mm,
going to be very like often demographic or
yeah.
oriented, where you're saying we've got a product we want to sell. How do we target this to people who might be interested and who might buy the product? What we
Hmm.
do is it's still personas, but it's something called a user persona, where the person using this, what goals are they trying to achieve? And you develop more of like a psychological profile, a behavioral profile to about this person. So you know some things about what does this person know? What are their skills? What are their goals? Not just what would they say their goals are, what would their job description say their goals are, but what do they really want to achieve? What makes them tick? And
Mm-hmm.
when you know these things and you are able to illustrate it in some type of way, maybe a document of some sort, or a company might have personas, and you maybe make a poster out of it and put it on the wall, and it becomes part of the company culture where they say, we're designing this app for Sam the salesman. And
Mm-hmm.
this is the thing that they're trying to achieve. And then quotes from
Oh.
people who represent Sam. And then everyone is able to fix their mind on, we're solving this problem for X, this persona. And it makes it a lot easier to make design decisions, to think about what should be the direction that we go in, and to fill that gap of, where are we with our technology and how do we close the gap of making this as seamless as possible for our users.
Man, that's interesting because I never thought about. I've always been thinking about buyer persona, right? I mean, I'm pretty sure I'm like part of the 90% that thinks that way, or more, right? Because we always have this product, right? You're building businesses, our culture, not even just our culture, but in the world right now, the society today are just saying, hey, look, start your own business, right? Everybody has their own business stuff, but what they're looking for is that buyer persona, right? When they're going through things, but there's a difference. And I never understood the difference till you broke it down, right? It has a little bit of the buyer persona in there, but it still has its own unique aspect, and I
Right.
didn't realize.
Right. And then plus we also live in the age of buying and selling of data. And then that becomes a big thing of like, Facebook can sell companies data, and
Right.
that company is better able to make targeted ads and things like that because they know something about about that as a persona. And then so more and more, usually those buyer personas, they're in the marketing departments, and they're like, okay, who are we gonna sell this to? And then the personas, like the kind of user personas, they
Hmm.
are often on like the product team who's building the software. Now, oftentimes there's a heavy overlap, right? It might
Hmm.
be a product that it's like on the app store, and like seeing about it and using it is like really close together, versus some companies build enterprise software, and the buyer might be someone who is a high ranking executive who writes a check for an annual subscription, where the users might be employees who by the hundreds or thousands have to use a certain software application, and they're very different in that case from the buyer.
Right.
So it's always important to be really, really grounded, because what we do is user-centered design. Yeah, that's the term for it, UCD, user-centered
Mm.
design. And it's the really this started. It's what's known as UX today. That the history of it comes from human factors. Human factors is the field of you're engineering things with the human in mind, and this came from right around World War II. It was discovered that the previous mentality was like, you have to use these machines, whether they're airplanes, submarines, and stuff like that. You, the human, have to adapt to the machine, right? And this
Mm.
is part of just the hierarchical authority structure of also the military. Is like, you do as you're told. Whether you're working at a factory or you're working in the military, that's kind of the mentality. Well, after enough planes crash or enough accidents at the factories happen, you start realizing, okay, we need to make this so that it's centered around how do humans want to do things. So if you're designing an airplane cockpit, or
Mm.
the console of a submarine, the positioning of the buttons, the locations of things, how easily
Uh,
this one you move, it's adapted to your hands. So ergonomics is one that's a little bit more familiar to folks. Is ergonomic scissors have the grips
mhm.
for the fingers, or ergonomic chair is made with knowledge of how your back is aligned and stuff like that. And what we do is it's the same concept as ergonomics, but it's taking
Mhm.
psychology. So if you think of
Mm.
things like memory, working memory span, how many pieces of information can a person hold in their mind as they're making decisions? How will people notice things on a screen? How will people, a forgetting curve? You remember some things for some months, and then it falls
Right.
off.
Right.
All of these aspects of attention, motivation, all these psychological attributes. When you're aware of these kinds of phenomenon and you're bringing that to the design process, you're able to achieve a lot more as a designer.
Yeah, I never noticed how important that aspect is because I'm one who would just create something, right? Just put it out there. It's all good. But you're not even thinking about your end user, right? You're not thinking about that the end user thinks a certain way, right? And you mentioned something that actually caught my attention. Well, all of it did, but one thing that you mentioned was I forgot the word you used, but I guess to sum it up, basically the attention span that somebody may have for a specific look. Think about a website or think about a video, right? You're putting this video out, right? And the average attention span of a human or versus a kid versus a person between certain ages versus a person that actually does one craft versus another, right? All that stuff matters. That attention span, like, why would I make a video that's like 2 hours long, right? Knowing that my audience attention span is kids or something.
You probably use this knowledge more often than you think. You
Uh-huh.
probably actually do utilize it in your day-to-day
Oh.
work when you're catering to people, but you might not
Mhm.
be specializing it in the way we do. But if like the example that you just gave, like if someone was a videographer,
Uh-huh.
they might know that, if you have this clip or this scene for too long, it's going to get boring. So you've got to change, put this in, or,
Right,
while the
right,
person's talking, switch to the B-roll and make it looking, and people
right.
become aware when they're catering to audiences, like the loosely the tendencies
Mhm.
of the audience and the viewers. What they're probably not doing is like diving deep head on into it as like a science, like deep into the
Right,
psychology of
right,
like
right.
studying the heck out of it and saying like, okay, I'm gonna craft this so that it's taking into account all those factors.
Right. And I would say, I guess, understanding the why, right? We
Mm.
do it. We do it, like you said, we probably do it more often than not, but we just do it because either everybody else doing it or we're just moving fast, right? But there's a reason why we do some of the things we do and we don't sit back or shoot. I mean, like you said, the videographer, right? I'm sitting there, I was taking photo shoots for my business. I'm doing the videography and all that stuff. And they're doing B-roll shots and everything. They just say, yeah, we're gonna do B-roll shots here. I never said why, right? I'm just
Mhm.
doing it. I'm just living in the moment, right? Okay, great, great, great. It never crossed my mind that there's a reason why they transition from here to here to here and stuff to keep people's attention is one of the reasons why, right? Because the human mind only has a short attention, a certain amount of minutes or whatever that they're dedicating to this one thing, right? The average person, maybe, you know,
That's right.
that's
That's
interesting.
that's right. And then and a layer on top of that is when we're talking about like designing digital products, what we do is that you are often designing something where people won't see exactly that. So if
Mm,
I make a mock-up of a screen, that screen is not going to exactly be seen the way I've got it drawn in my thing. This is a digital product that's going to give a person their own unique data and their own experience. So then you have to be a little bit more meta about it. Of like, okay, we're this kind of like data visualization. So let's use this as an example. If you compare in data visualization, you've got a data set
mhm,
and it needs to be presented. Presenting a specific data set for a specific slideshow for a specific
mhm,
audience, that's different than designing, well, this type of data with these columns needs to be presented to this kind of job role and they need to make X, Y, and Z decisions with it. And one of them, the exact data that there is. So you have the ability to highlight what's important in that data and design for
mhm.
that specifically. And the other one, you have to have like a little bit of a better knowledge of like, what does, what do people need to attend to? What's the nature of this data? What's the normal range? If I make this graph, is it always going to be like the graphs are always full or always empty? Because in reality, that's the nature of the data. And you have to take that into
Yeah.
account. So, yeah. So, anyway, I think it's all about taking into account the full breadth of things. And we don't always think about in psychology how that is a major factor in the things that we build.
No, you're making a great point, you know. And speaking of design, speaking of data visualization, right? I mean, the more we just talked about what you're doing at Three Leaf, right? You know, and design psychology in general, you know, for those who already know what data visualization is, right? They start to understand how important it is, right? Somebody that's a newbie that's getting into data visualization, they may just say, look, these charts and graphs, you know, I just got to present charts and graphs using Tableau, right? Using BI, right? It's all good, right? I got this data set. I'm just going to dump it in there and it creates these charts and graphs. Great colors and all that stuff like that. They're not even thinking that that stuff matters, right? A graphical format matters, right? You know, and so you're bringing up some great points, right? When you're looking at visualization and data for like presentations, how important is it to apply design psychology to that?
It's critically important. And it's not applied often enough. And people who are in this kind of design psychology profession and usability, they don't
Mhm.
go very often into data visualization. And when I go to data visualization conferences, I see mostly business people, people who come out of maybe math, a lot of engineers who know how to like operate with the actual data sets
Mhm.
and render them, right? Because a lot of times the challenge is seen as I've got data, can I render it on a screen? And then the different ways of rendering it in interesting ways becomes the main challenge that
Mhm.
everybody's trying to solve. The problem that people are not focused probably enough on is how do we present data so that people gain insights from the world.
Mhm.
So I've even it's even been argued before. I think Stephen Few, author of a bunch of important data visualization books, I think it is him who has argued that we think we live in an information age, but it's actually more of a data age because we're not
Mhm.
making enough clarity of it for it to be real information. And so,
Mhm.
and so when you think about that, every aspect of life, regardless to the job role, I don't care how simple you think your job role might be, you have data that's critical to you operating effectively.
I
And
tell people that
so
all the time, man. I mean, I'm glad
you tell
somebody
people
is.
that.
I tell people all the time that the role they play at work, right? When you're sitting there, it doesn't matter what you're doing, right? You could be a restaurant owner, you can be in pharmacy, right?
School
It doesn't matter what
teacher,
you're doing,
bus
right? School
driver.
teacher,
Yeah,
you're using data to make decisions all the
absolutely.
time. Go ahead. Sorry
And,
about
even further, anybody, I believe any job role could have a dashboard that's meaningful to them.
Oh man.
Any job role, I believe any job role. I can't think of a single job role where you couldn't possibly imagine a dashboard that would be ideal for them. Whether you're a school teacher, whether you're, let's say, a bus driver. Let's say there was a dashboard
Oh.
about today's traffic and the likelihood of, maybe different routes or
Uh-huh.
people. There's something you can imagine because it's the data that people need in order to make decisions. Because
Hmm.
that's what we do through life. We size up our surroundings and we try to make the best decision. And with technology, what we hope we can do is leverage the technology so that we
Hmm.
can gather the data. And that's a little bit too romanticized, I think. That might be possibly saved for the overrated big data, underrated
Right.
data insights, maybe something like that, right? But so so we gather the data and collect and collect and collect. How do we
Mhm.
present it to people? Not just do data art or show it in a way that is pleasant or nice looking, but how do you deliver this stuff to where it's actually giving people insights? And you know how you do it when I design a dashboard. The test that I give is not show the dashboard and say, "Hey, what do you think?" Show the dashboard and to someone whose job role or it's relevant, it's the type of data that would be relevant to that person, and
Mm.
watch what they start doing. If they say like, "Oh, it looks nicer," they start giving superficial feedback. That's one type of response. But if they start reading it and responding to it as if it's actually data, oftentimes that's a good sign because they just
That's a
start
great
using it.
sign.
They
Yeah.
just start instantly reading it. They're like, well, that shouldn't be that high. This should be at this level. I don't know what is going
Ah,
on if it, and then that's when I start hearing that, I'm like, yes,
that means
I
they understand
that's right.
what you
They understand it
presented to
so
them.
well, it's invisible, right?
Yeah.
Because
Ah,
they're
right,
looking
right.
past the physical features of the dashboard. They're not saying, "Oh, I like the colors," and then they're saying, like, "Well, I don't know why." You're showing it to a school teacher. It's like, "Well, I don't know. This person's scores are so, um, you know, low, but they're going to all the classes. Their attendance scores that's not lining up." It's because they're expecting a correlation, and then there isn't one, or they're looking for outliers. They're looking for stories being told in the data. So when we can do more data storytelling and do
Hmm.
more, supporting people's insights, and this requires investing time in understanding the psychology of
Yeah.
people in general, but then also in the specific persona that you're catering to, interviewing them, talking to them, sitting next to them while they're doing their work, kind of getting into their world and seeing what makes them tick.
Man, man, you just spit so much knowledge, right? I hope you're hearing this audience. This is amazing, right? This is we're we're entering something right here. We're entering the brain, man. That human psychology, the understanding the brain and the way it works, and applying it to the end result, right? You can apply that to not just data visualization, but the entire aspect of data science, right? When you're asking those questions, right? Understanding how the organization works, right? Asking the right questions to get the answer out of them. They need to. I mean, I talk to CEOs all the time, right? And I'll give a perfect example of a CEO. I talk about this. I've talked about it probably in about one or two episodes before, but I, it was a CEO one time that I sat down with, and I presented to him everything except for the visualization piece, right? And I was presenting the Excel spreadsheet, right? I'm like, I did this in Python, all this stuff. He's like, I do not care. What do you? The end result is what mattered, right? The data visualization piece. He wants the charts and graphs, right? And that goes back to tell me that goes back to show that everybody at a certain level, right, within their organization needs that dashboard, like you mentioned, right? They need that visualization piece, right? I understand charts and graphs better than I understand Excel spreadsheet with a bunch of rows and columns and numbers and things like that, right? And then I can make a decision based off of this chart and graph faster than I can make a decision based off of something I really don't understand, you know. And so you're bringing up some great points there, man.
That's right. And one way to think about there's a couple of ways to think about data visualization because I know your audience, this audience is very familiar with data and statistics, but
Mhm.
that's it's kind of probably a mix. One way to
Yeah.
think about this is signal detection theory. Not to get too deep in it, but
Mhm.
signal detection theory. You're dealing with the question of you've got stuff that you see. Imagine you're looking at a radar visual, right? And you've got dots everywhere, period. You've got dots everywhere. Some of that is the signal, some of it is the noise.
Mhm.
So in data visualization, we're trying to increase the signal and reduce the noise.
Reduce the noise of the data being
That's right.
presented, right?
That's
Yeah.
right. That's right. Because if you were to look just straight at the data tables, right, it would be like
Uh-huh.
almost all noise because you have to like
Mhm.
really look around for the signal and most of what you're seeing is not relevant. That's why you have just
Yeah.
basic graphs even exist because you're like, okay, look at these dots or look at the lengths of these lines and you're able to perceive that.
Mhm.
Whereas it's harder to just pick up the idea of trends when you're just looking at tables. So as a simple example, time series data.
Time series.
And
Yeah.
usually time series data is represented with what type of chart? Usually a
Oh,
line.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
'cause usually when people hear time series, that we only make this point. People think time series is a type of chart. It's that type of data, but
I
then
think
there's usually
about
a chart.
time series. I think about the actual algorithm, right, being utilized.
Oh,
I think about time series. When I think about time series, I think about looking at. I mean, and maybe. I didn't think about it from a visualization standpoint at all, right? I've always thought about over time capturing data, right, to be able to show it, but it's more of a statistical point of view things, right? Is
That's
that is
right.
that what you're doing as well?
Yeah, exactly. So like normally when you're looking at time series data, well, I guess that you know, it's no point in me wrong here, but I've already got the pen in my hand, so it's wrong. You're looking for trends. That doesn't really show up. It's green. I don't know why the sun's shining. But for the listeners, I'm drawing on the board. It didn't work out. So you are interested in the trend of the data. So if you depict all these different points as one continuous line, for example, it's easy for the human eye to instantly perceive that as a shape that has a trend, and it's easier to understand that. That's the core of data visualization: the lengths of lines, the positions of dots, the shape of lines. When you're taking those kinds of elements, you're catering to stuff that you get for free because you have a sensory perceptual cognitive system where all of that stuff happens instantly. So you're constantly taking in stimuli into your eyes, and you're able to get a certain amount of that automatically. So as data visualizationists, we say, okay, well, we're going to take this huge data set, we're going to depict it in a way that it caters to the human eye, optical, and brain structure to where you get a certain amount of it automatically just from looking at it. So then we take that to a more extreme stance and we say, like, okay, now that we've got basic graphs, charts, and that stuff that exists, how do we crank up the signal and temper down the noise? And
Yeah.
so, and there's a lot of implications to that, right? So that's against the goals of maybe data art, right? If someone is kind of in the business of like, well, I make graphs look really beautiful and I decorate them and they do that. Well, oftentimes they're adding noise for the sake of entertainment. And then that's
Mhm.
not the goal you want to achieve with data visualization. You want to increase the signal, reduce the noise so that the person who's perceiving that can get their insights as clear as possible.
Yeah, and I guess ultimately what you're doing is making it easier for those decision makers, right, to see and
Right.
understand the trends, right, the outliers, the patterns, right, over time, like you mentioned, right, all that stuff in the data, you're able to see those trends over time, and that's the decision maker wants to see that, right, over a series of time, right. If you were mentioning time series, or if it's like maps and charts probably were among the earliest forms of data visualization,
Right.
and I'm seeing the way that you're able to really make a difference when it comes down to that.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. So hopefully we're making the world a better place by making these insights easier to see.
Yeah, yeah, definitely, man. And the way I look at data visualization, man, is probably only successful to the degree that it encodes the information in the manner that our eyes can discern it, right?
That's
And our
right.
brains can understand it, right? You
That's
know,
right.
that's the
That's
only
right.
way that I see data visualization, and it's crazy. I really didn't see it like that until I would say that CEO told me that they want to see that part, right? They don't want to see all the noise. The noise is not helping them at all, right? Make that decision, right? You know.
And then people give up on data visualization in general. I've heard people say because they didn't get the right ones. I've heard executives say, "Well, you know what? We're not going to do dashboards anymore. They're really not. They really don't work that well. We need to focus on ML and algorithms and stuff like that." Well, yeah, that's wonderful. We need the ML and the algorithms, but let's not
Mhm.
give up so fast on the basic. Just present data to
Yeah, the
people.
presentation, right?
Yeah, that's it.
You
It's
know,
the presentation. Don't give up
I'm
on the
gonna
whole thing.
I'll be completely honest, Thomas. Like when I first started out, right, I saw the different stages throughout what I call data science as a whole, right? But just transformation of data as you ingest it. I'm like, okay, I get the ingestion, right? Different sources, blah blah. You got database, you got unstructured, structured data. You're ingesting all this data in, right? That's cool, right? I'm like, okay, I got that. I've been doing that for years, ingesting it to somewhere. Then I got really interested in data mining portion, right? I was like, man, the merging of it, right? The data that is missing, right? Making sure you get those white spaces out of those Excel spreadsheets and stuff, right? Because at the end of the day, when you present this and you know in Tableau, whatever it is, any visualization, if you're presenting data, right, you're presenting the data somebody's given to you, maybe from a database, or you might have ingested it in yourself. But if it's bad data, you still got to filter all that stuff out and make sure that it's clean data that's being presented, or else you're giving bad information or bad data, you're making bad decisions. But I never said that data visualization was that important to me, right? To try to figure out, right? It's only been over the past, I've been doing data science probably for about maybe 8 to 10 years, right? And even every part of it, every stage, right? And I would always say, even throughout my doctorate degree, right? I'm like, we had a data visualization course. I'm like, oh yeah, just Tableau, blah blah, all these different things. You just use it, just talk about. I never understood how important that piece is, right? That's like the final piece of the puzzle.
That's
And
right.
if you do not put energy into that, right, you need to put, if not, more energy than everything else. You need to put that energy right there needs to put it's equal, at least on the equal playing field as every other piece, And I didn't realize that until probably about 3 to 5 years ago, man. So I'm glad that you're focusing in and doing something like that, focusing in on data visualization because a lot of people don't really do that as much as they should.
Yeah, and that's why I've got this. I'm on a mission where it's the in the designer world. There's an annual conference, UXPA. I guess this is a plug. Um, uh, of user
Hmm.
experience professionals. I teach an annual class there most years where it's about data visualization, and I
Hmm.
want there to be more designers who get into this kind of stuff because a lot of
Hmm.
them aren't into the data science side like you are, where where they're very comfortable with data and algorithm and what's a variable and what is a column and the different types of numbers and the different types of scale. People aren't comfortable with that, so we miss out on a lot of folks who are good at design thinking. They don't get into the design, the data side of often. And in fact, in a lot of those courses, I end up teaching lately about data thinking. So I think there's
Mm.
design thinking, but there's also data thinking. Like, so for example, you're if you work for a company that's building a product and it collects data in a certain way. The data that you want doesn't exist because it's not collected in that way. It's not calculated yet. And sometimes you have to think about, well, we are collecting this metric, and it's just like we're not we're not dividing it by anything. So like imagine if you were collecting data like um, how many people have come to the store. Like let's say you're a store owner,
Hmm.
and it logs when a new shopper comes into the store. But
Hmm.
let's say it doesn't give you how many people per day or how many people per week or how many people per month or year. It just gives you a count of how many people have ever come into the store. And it's just an
Uh-huh.
ever growing number. Well, that's going to be useless to people, but it's a start. Once you talk to the engineers, and you're like, okay, we're collecting that data. Well,
Hmm.
can we divide it by day? Like take
Yeah.
right the number at the beginning of the day, the number at the end. You know,
Uh-huh.
compute that, and then just say like this is how many per day, and then so then that takes a certain level of like thinking about the data and what's going on back there. And sometimes you have to work with the engineers to say like, okay, you're collecting this already. I know you don't have this metric, but how would it be a heavy lift to build it so that we can get this data too? Because that would be really awesome
Mm.
if we could present this to the users. Is that possible?
Right.
Can we do that? So that's
And they
we have to be
probably
able to
don't even
engage them.
realize how that stuff is possible. It's just they're not thinking
They're not
about
thinking
collecting
about it.
that.
They're
Right.
not thinking
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah. It's like open your mind, right? To think. But is honestly, I would say that creativity has been a big part in my way of thinking, right? And I had to understand how to be more creative with how to ask the right questions to myself, right? When starting a company, thinking about data, right? You have this end goal, this end project that you're trying to do, right? Am I collecting all the right data? Because sometimes there's data that needs to be collected, like people think, right? They have one way of thinking, right? Let me collect this one thing, right? Or maybe these multiple roles, right? That's great, but they don't understand how collecting one data set and another data set can actually give you your final solution, right? So combining some things, it might not be important separately, but sometimes combining, right, two different data points can give you exactly what you need, right, going forward. So yeah, man, people don't think like that a lot of time, So
Right.
I do want to highlight, right? When we talked about UX, right, we talked about usability, in there we talked about data visualization, right? You know,
And,
so I want to get into um, everybody knows I like to end it with some type of summary or some type of dope nugget, right? Gem. So after hearing this conversation, right? Um, in my eyes, I think two important things to understand. One is data viz, is for that human perception standpoint, right? Think like the person, the end user, the consumer, right? The person that is on the other end. I like the fact that you say user, right? Versus that buyer persona. And also, I want to highlight, right, patience. You know, Patience is important, right? Understanding the person that you're working with, and at the end of the day, the how the visualization piece is going to come to light. Don't rush it, right? Patience is important. Is there anything that you want to share with the audience as a summarization?
I would say that remember that the user uh, is the kind of end goal usually in a lot of the stuff that you're thinking about. In data viz, the screen or the graph is not the end result. It's the person who's on the other side perceiving that and able to make decisions with it.
Great point, man. Great point. Well, Thomas, I appreciate you being on. I like to play this game. Everybody knows what's called overrated,
Please.
underrated. At the end, basically, I ask you a series of topics. You get to decide whether it's overrated, underrated, or right where it needs to be. Are you ready?
I am ready.
All right. The printer.
The printer.
Yes.
Ooh, that's a tough one because printers usually suck. Oh, I guess I'm gonna have to say though underrated because I like the physical copies. I think that's important.
Oh, you do? Oh man, that's the
Yeah,
first I heard that from like a technologist, man. Yeah, I haven't heard that in a while.
right. It is.
All right. All right. Snow.
Snow is because people do love snow in the so it's hard to say it's overrated.
Mhm.
Um,
What about you
I
though?
for me, man, I like snow. Man, I like snow,
Mhm.
so I'm gonna have to say underrated.
Y'all don't get it out there in Houston, right?
We don't, we don't. I grew up partly in Boston, so we got it all the time.
Oh,
I
so
live
you
in
got
Boston.
snow out
Yeah,
there, right?
right, right. Yeah, but in Houston, no.
All right, next one, brunch.
Brunch is properly rated. I think I have to
Okay,
go with underrated. I have to pick one. Brunch is awesome.
I agree. I agree. All right, I'm doing this for Houston because they said that this is popular. Tacos.
Tacos are. I can't call them overrated because tacos are awesome. I'm gonna have to still go with underrated. I'm gonna have to go with underrated.
Okay, okay, okay.
You're picking a lot of good things here.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. All right, one more. Titanic. The Titanic movie.
Probably overrated.
I agree, man. Yeah, I would say the first time I saw it, I'm a big Leonardo DiCaprio fan. I think he's a good actor, and I was like, okay, it's cool, but that was younger generation Leonardo DiCaprio. But after that, I was like, all right. I think I talked to somebody else. They said something that was important to me. I was like, oh, the or that resonated with me that the song, the Celine Dion song or
Right.
whatever, is actually something that continues on, that keeps it going, right?
That's true. That's true. That's true. It became bigger
Yeah, yeah.
than Titanic.
All right. Well, one more thing. NASA Johnson Space Center. Have
Oh
you?
man, I think that NASA is underrated. So I'm gonna even add to that.
Uh-huh.
SpaceX overrated, NASA underrated. Oh my goodness.
Oh man. Oh man.
I love
Okay.
space. I think SpaceX is doing great things, but
Uh-huh.
I think people we need scientific exploration. We can't just have egotistical ambitions of
Right.
rich space people.
I'm with you, man. I'm with you. All right, okay. Hey, look, Thomas, man, it's been great, man. You've been a
Great
great
being
guest.
here.
Thank you for listening to Data's My Science podcast, audience. This is your host, Dapper Data. This is a show that makes data your passion. Thomas, again, I appreciate you being on. Where can they reach you at
Likewise.
if they want to get in touch with you? And are you promoting anything?
I'm not promoting anything right now, but 3leaf.consulting is my website, 3leaf number 3leaf.consulting. And otherwise, if you're a professional, find me on LinkedIn, Thomas Watkins, or find 3leaf Method on Instagram is how you can also connect with me.
All right. Thank you. And audience, you know that you can reach me at Mr. Dapper Date on any one of the social media platforms. Definitely hit me on LinkedIn. I'm always on there. But 81 Twitter, Facebook, you name it. And definitely look out for my book coming out talking about social media analytics and how I can help you out for that. It's actually already out, but I'm doing another version. So just go ahead and ping me if you need me. All right. Love you all. Peace.